This day in sports history. This episode is brought to you by Sterling Roastery. For several months you've heard me talking about the great products and scents offered by the Sterling Soap Company. And while there may not seem to be any correlation between soap and coffee, what is similar is the same care and attention to detail in delivering great products to their customers. Sterling Roastery will ship great-tasting beans or ground coffee, for whatever coffee-making process you prefer, right to your door. I gave their breakfast blend a try recently, and I can tell you, it was a great way to get my day kick-started with this smooth, medium blend. And just like their soaps, they have a variety to choose from. Give Sterling Roastery a try at sterlingsoap.com. It's July 15th, and on this day in 1990, things got a little bit testy at Yankee Stadium. The Yankees have had some polarizing players throughout the ages, and Deion Sanders was just one on that list. Midway through the 1990 season, the Bronx Bombers were fizzling. They were mired in the AL East cellar, 16 games back of first, and they would stay there the rest of the season. This was Game 4 of a 4-game series between the Yankees and the Chicago White Sox. The Yankees had no reason to have any swagger at this point in the season, and yet when Deion Sanders walked to the plate in the first inning, he did so in only the way that Neon Deion would. According to White Sox catcher Carlton Fisk, Deion drew a $sign in the batter's box. Deion said later it was part of his ritual and to show where his feet should go. Not a $sign. But to Fisk, it was a $sign, which actually seems to fit Deion's persona a little bit better. He had a pop-up that was sure to be caught. He took 2 steps towards first, and then he walked towards the dugout. And that's when Fisk started yelling at Deion.
I said, "Run the ball out." And he said, "Huh? What?" I said, "Run the ball out." And he never makes it to first base. He just takes the right and goes into the dugout. I said, I don't know if anybody that I have ever played against has disrespected the game like he appears to be doing. Right. Just with his body language and his attitude. And somebody deserves his, and he's not even a baseball player, but somebody deserves him something. So he comes up again, and he draws a $sign in the dirt again. And you know what he says, Joe? He says, "Hey, man, the days of slavery are over." And I went, "What? You?" No, I can't say what I said. I stood up and I walked up on him face to face, right. And I said, "I don't care whether you're black or blue or pink or red. There's a right way and a wrong way to play this game, and you're playing it wrong. And you know something? I'm an old guy, and it offends guys like me. So if you don't start playing this game right, I'm going to kick your ass right here."
And after he said that, the two started going at it, and the benches cleared. It was just one of the many weird stories from the weird 1990 season for the Yankees. Speaking of weird stories, how about this one from 1994? And once again, the White Sox play a bit part in this one. The Cleveland Indians were playing at Chicago's Comiskey Park. The teams were back from the All-Star break, and this game was just one of many on the schedule. A ho-hum game in July. Until it wasn't. This was the second game of a 3-game series between the Indians and the White Sox. The night before, Chicago had won 6-3, but in that game, Albert Belle hit a 2-run homer in the first inning, his 26th homer of the season. White Sox manager Gene Lamont had been given a little intel that Belle's bat might be corked. When Belle came to the plate for the first time on this night, Lamont went to home plate umpire Dave Phillips to express his concern that Belle's bat had been modified, which is illegal, and that he wanted it checked. Well, it's not an immediate process. It needs to be x-rayed to see if the bat had been corked or not. But the bat was confiscated and sent back to the umpire's dressing room to be checked later. Belle grabbed a teammate's bat and play continued. And that's when the intrigue began. Belle's teammates knew his bats were corked, and that it was only a matter of time before the x-ray would prove that to be the case, with heavy fines and a suspension surely to follow. So a plan was hatched to switch the bat with an uncorked one. One hitch in that plan was that Belle's teammates knew that all of his bats were illegal, and a swap would need to be made with someone else's legal timber. Pitcher Jason Grimsley was a willing foot soldier in this operation, and he came up with a daring plan. He went on a Tom Cruise Mission Impossible. With a pen light in his mouth guiding his way through a ventilation shaft in the ceiling, he crawled his way to the umpire's dressing room. Now, he did have time. The game would go on for another 2.5 hours. He dropped through the vent, grabbed Belle's bat, switched it with one of Paul Sorrento's bats, and then he went back into the vent, crawled back the other way, and he was soon back in the Indians' dugout. All clear. Until it wasn't. In the 6th inning, a custodian entered the locker room and noticed pieces of ceiling tile on the carpet, and that a few of the metal pieces holding the drop ceiling in place were bent. Cleveland won the game 3-2. Belle had gone 1 for 4 with 2 strikeouts using someone else's bat. When the umpires got back to their locker room, they took one look at the bat and knew something janky was up. The bat they'd sent back to the locker room was not the one they were looking at now. It was very different. And besides, this one had Paul Sorrento's name burned into it. The police were called. The umps went all Hercule Poirot and started interviewing Cleveland players about where the bat was, who had it. They wanted the original, but it had been stuffed deep in a player's locker. So instead, they asked for another Albert Belle bat. And if only he'd had a regular legal bat with his name on it. But again, he did not. They were all corked. An FBI agent was actually flown in the next day to investigate the theft. The American League office ordered Cleveland to produce the original, or the full force of the FBI would be coming down on them. So finally, Belle's original bat was produced, analyzed, and found to be an illegally corked bat. The FBI investigation was dropped, and Belle was suspended for 10 games originally, but after an appeal, it was reduced to 7 games. It would hardly matter in a few weeks, though. Players went on strike in August, wiping out the rest of the regular season and the postseason. It wasn't until 5 years later that Grimsley's role in the caper was revealed. In an interview with the New York Times in 1999 and later corroborated by Omar Vizquel, Grimsley admitted he was the burglar. This episode is brought to you by Firefly Books, and with you being a sports fan just like me, here's 2 suggestions for your next great sports read. If you love basketball, then you need to add Dave Zarum's book, NBA 75, The Definitive History. Uncover untold stories of triumph, controversy, and the greatest stars of the game. From the league's humble beginnings to its modern glory, it is a courtside seat to 75 years of NBA history. And if you're a golf fanatic, then you gotta check out Matt Adams' book, The Golf Round I'll Never Forget. I've used it as a reference in this podcast over the past year for lots of stories that I've done, and I can tell you from experiencing it, this is a great book. Relive 50 of golf's most memorable moments through the eyes of the legends themselves. It's the closest you'll ever get to walking the fairways with the greatest to ever play the game. Grab your copy of NBA 75 or The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, available from Firefly, wherever you get your books. On this day in 2005, Jack Nicklaus finished his competitive golf career at the birthplace of golf, St. Andrews. He played his final round appropriately enough with Tom Watson, who he had battled so many times in the majors, including the duel in the sun, which I talked about a few days ago. He won the Open Championship 3 times in his career, part of his 18 major tournament wins. Walking up the 18th fairway on this day, Nicklaus received a 10-minute ovation when he stopped for a long moment on the Swilcan Bridge to soak in the moment, and then, in true Golden Bear fashion, rolled in this 15-foot birdie putt to shoot even par 72 and close out his 43-year professional golf career.
So come on, the final stroke. Let's make this the final stroke in Jack Nicklaus's Open career. Hold the putt for us, Jack, and listen to the roar if he does. Yes, Jack!
Thank you ever so much.
The perfect ending to a remarkable career. And a hug between father and son. And everyone gets a little bit emotional at these moments, but we really have seen something special today. Jack finishes with a birdie, and his Open career is finally over.
Now, one of the reasons that American golfers even played in the British Open can be attributed to what happened on this day in 1961, when Arnold Palmer won his first Open championship at Royal Birkdale. Palmer was the first American to really make it a priority to make the trip to the UK to play in the Open. He wasn't the first, of course. I talked about Ben Hogan's lone journey to Scotland in '53 to the Open, but travel across the Atlantic had not been easy or quick. By the 60s, things had progressed to the point where it was a little bit easier to make the trip, but of course, some good marketing can also make it more attractive. And there really was not a better ambassador of the game than Arnold Palmer. He was a man of the people who had the ability to say the right thing at the right time or bring joy to a group of people simply with a smile. He ushered in the first big explosion in golf in the U.S. with his style of play, and he helped make the British Open a more international affair.
One of the major reasons that I went to the British Open was it intrigued me. International golf, golf in Europe, but the European situation in those days was very quiet. It was not overwhelming. Going to the British Open was something that when I first understood what the game of golf was all about and talked to my father about it, it was something that if you didn't go and play and do something in the British Open, you really weren't, you couldn't put yourself in the class of a professional golfer.
Palmer was also fiercely competitive, and he was not happy about finishing as the runner-up at the 1960 Open. His final round 68 came up one shot short in 1960. He was also a bit miffed to have come up short at both the Masters and the U.S. Open earlier in 61. Now, Arnie had a few majors under his belt by this point, but he knew his game was better than his results were showing, and he was anxious to prove that. Now, rain, wind, and general foul weather are not unheard of in the UK. Royal Birkdale is on the west coast of England on the Irish Sea, and the weather started to kick up a bit in the second round. But it did not seem to bother Palmer with his slashing swing and his swashbuckling style. He birdied 5 of the first 6 holes to move up the leaderboard. The wind was so furious it moved his ball in the bunker on one hole after he'd addressed it. Palmer called a penalty on himself despite the fact that no one had seen it, and probably would have excused it based on the conditions that they were playing in. Well, he called the conditions that day the worst he ever played in. The wind blew so hard it pulled the stakes holding concessions tents out of the ground and sent them flying. Lots of things without wings took flight. He managed to shoot a 1/73 in the second round, which happened to be the best score of the day, and he moved to within a shot of the lead. The weather turned furious, though, and completely washed out Friday's 36-hole schedule. On Saturday, Arnold took control of the tournament with a morning round of 69, and he had a comfortable 4-shot lead with 4 holes to play. But if not for a fantastic shot on the 15th, it may not have been enough. His tee shot on the 15th came to rest in thick grass at the base of a gorse bush. Palmer, always a guy willing to play a high-risk shot, pulled a 6-iron from the bag and he slashed at it. Dirt, grass, and parts of the bush went flying, but so too did the ball. It went 140 yards, landed on the green, and he 2-putted for par. Welshman Dai Rees was fast on his heels. Playing in the group in front of Palmer, Rees stormed back with birdies on the final 3 holes to force Palmer to make par at the 18th to win. He did, to win the Claret Jug for the first time. Now, for Rees, this was the final heartbreak. He'd played the Open Championship beginning in 1938. He finished second to Hogan in 53, second to Peter Thompson in 54, and here in his final appearance at the Open Championship, finished second once again to Palmer. The Brits fell in love with Palmer, though, just like American golf fans. Arnold would come back the following year and win it again, and he started to bring some of his golf buddies along with him. In 61, he had been the only American on the leaderboard and one of only 2 to play in it. In 62, there were 3 American names on the final leaderboard, and a handful of others down the list, including Jack Nicklaus, who made his first appearance at the Open Championship in 1962. And the American invasion was in full force. On this day in 1912, Jim Thorpe won the Olympic gold medal for the decathlon in Stockholm. Now, if you remember back to the July 7th edition of this dish, I talked about Thorpe's win in the pentathlon. Now, a little over a week later, Thorpe was putting the finishing touches on the decathlon. The event, featuring 10 different competitions, began on the 13th and ended on the 15th. And in that 3-day span, Thorpe won the shot put, the high jump, the 110-meter hurdles, and finally the 1,500 meters. His time in the 1,500-meter run was 4 minutes 40 seconds, a time that would not be bettered by a decathlete in the Olympics for another 60 years. He won the gold with 8,412 points, 688 points more than Sweden's Hugo Wieslander, who won the silver. 29 men started the event, but only 12 finished. Sweden's King Gustaf V declared Thorpe to be the world's greatest athlete. The Olympic team was celebrated with a ticker tape parade in New York upon their return, with Thorpe said to have received the loudest cheers. But a little more than 6 months later, the U.S. Olympic Committee discovered that Thorpe had been paid $25 a week to play baseball in North Carolina in the summer of 1910 and 1911, violating its incredibly strict and draconian rules on amateurism. Despite the discovery being past the 60-day window to file an opposition, punishment was swift and severe, and on this day in 1913, Thorpe was stripped of his 2 gold medals. Wieslander was awarded the gold in the decathlon, and Norway's Ferdinand Bia was awarded the gold in the pentathlon, though Bia refused to accept it, feeling that Thorpe had won fairly. Thorpe never fought the decision, despite a severe blow to his reputation that he would never truly recover from in the eyes of the public. He once told his daughter Grace, "I won him, and I know I won him." In 1982, there was a thawing of sorts as the International Olympic Committee awarded duplicate gold medals to Thorpe's surviving family members, but still listed Wieslander and Bia as co-champions in the events. It took another 40 years for the IOC to finally right the wrong in its entirety. And so on July 15th of 2022, 110 years after winning the decathlon, the IOC finally recognized Thorpe as the true and only winner of the Olympic pentathlon and decathlon in 1912. And time now for today's That's Got Nothing to Do with Sports fun fact. Quick, which country does France share its longest border with? I'll give you a few seconds to run through the geography in your brain, and then let you know that France shares its longest border with Brazil.
What you talking about, Willis?
French Guiana has a 730-mile-long border with Brazil, which is about 60 miles longer than the border it shares with Belgium. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.